It happened last November around 2:30 in the morning. I was driving the night shift in my old Crown Vic, cruising through the quieter parts of Queens. The streets were slick with rain, and everything felt slow and heavy, like the city had gone to sleep but left its eyes open. It was supposed to be my last ride for the night. I was tired, my back ached, and I just wanted to go home, eat something hot, and crash into bed. Then the dispatch pinged. Pickup request, 47th Avenue and 35th Street. Destination, unknown. No name. No destination. Just unknown. Weird, but not the weirdest thing I've seen, so I hit accept and drove over. The pickup spot was a dim, narrow side street between two old buildings. The kind of place you'd miss unless you were looking for it. I pulled up, engine idling, headlights cutting through the mist. For a moment I thought nobody was there. Then I saw her. A woman stepped out from the shadows. She was wearing a long black coat, soaked from the rain, and a scarf wrapped tightly around her head. Pale. Silent. She didn't say a word, just opened the door, got in the back seat and whispered, "Drive." "Where to?" I asked, trying to see her face in the rearview mirror. She didn't answer right away. Just stared out the window. "Just drive straight," she finally said. Her voice was soft, almost childlike. So I drove. We passed street after street and she didn't give me any directions. I kept glancing back, trying to get a better look at her. Something about her wasn't right. The way she sat so still. The way the air in the cab felt colder after she got in. About 10 minutes in, she spoke again. "Do you know what happened on 34th and Bliss?" No," I said, thrown off. "Something happened there?" She didn't reply. Just let out a slow breath like a sigh. A few blocks later she said, "Turn right here." We were on a street I didn't recognize, lined with boarded-up buildings. No lights. No movement. Like a part of the city that had been forgotten. "Stop here," she whispered. I pulled over. She didn't move. "Is this it?" I asked. Still nothing. I turned around and the back seat was empty. She was gone. I jumped out of the car, heart pounding, looking all around. No footsteps, no door sound, nothing. The street was silent, except for the soft drizzle of rain. I looked back in the cab. On the seat where she'd been sitting was a soaking wet scarf. And underneath it, God, I swear I'm not making this up, was an old newspaper clipping, yellowed and folded. It was dated November 1993. The headline read, "Woman killed in late night cab ride. Body found on 34th and Bliss." There was a photo of her face. Same woman. Same scarf. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. Didn't sleep that night. Still keep the clipping locked in my glove box like some kind of warning. I don't pick up random fares anymore, especially not on last call. And if you ever drive through Queens after 2 a.m., don't stop near 47th and 35th. If you see a woman in a long black coat looking for a ride, keep driving. I didn't go straight home that night. I couldn't. Even with the engine humming beneath me and the heater slowly pushing warmth back into the car, my body wouldn't stop shaking. Not from cold, not from exhaustion, something deeper, something older. Like the fear had settled into my bones. I kept the newspaper clipping on the passenger seat, weighted down by the scarf, as if either of them might slip away if I didn't keep an eye on them. Traffic was non-existent. The streets were ghost empty, and the blinking traffic lights cast an artificial rhythm across the wet pavement. Green, yellow, red, red again. The kind of silence that made every creak in the car sound deliberate, intimate, almost like the cab itself was trying to tell me something in between the lines of metal and rust. I ended up in a gas station parking lot off Queens Boulevard, just sitting there with the windows fogged, listening to the faint patter of rain ticking against the roof like fingers drumming on a coffin lid. My hands were still on the steering wheel. I hadn't even realized that I'd been squeezing it so hard until I looked down and saw the white lines where my skin had gone pale. The clipping kept drawing my eyes. That photo, grainy, black and white, felt like it was watching me. The woman's face wasn't fully in frame. Just one eye, part of her cheek, and the edge of her mouth in a slight, uncertain smile. But even in that small sliver of expression there was something off. Not grief. Not fear. Resignation. Like she knew what was coming. I unfolded the article fully. The paper was fragile, almost too dry for something that had been soaked with rain minutes earlier. The text blurred slightly, but I could still make out most of it. The body of 27-year-old Leah Morano was found shortly after 3 a.m. on November 17, 1993, dumped near the intersection of 34th Avenue and Bliss Street. Witnesses reported seeing her get into a yellow cab roughly 20 minutes before the estimated time of death. The driver was never identified. No arrests were made. That name Leah Morano sat heavy on my tongue as I whispered it aloud in the empty cab. The sound of it didn't echo. It just dropped like a stone into the stillness, absorbed by the thick silence pressing against the windows. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was still in shock. Maybe something was pulling me. But I typed 34th and Bliss into my GPS and started driving. I kept the windows rolled up, even though the glass was fogging again, turning the outside world into a smear of colors and shadows. The roads were narrower as I got closer to the old district, and the buildings leaned in tighter. More fences. More signs with peeling paint. Places that hadn't been open in years. The intersection itself was unremarkable. Just a corner between a row of crumbling apartment buildings and an old bakery with boards across its windows. No flowers. No candles. Nothing to mark it as a place where someone had once died. But when I pulled up and turned off the engine, a strange stillness settled in. The air felt heavier, like it had more weight than it should. Like breathing there took more effort. I sat for a while. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the engine as it cooled. And then I noticed something. A shape, barely visible through the mist on the passenger side window. It looked like someone standing still on the sidewalk just out of the glow of the street lamp. No movement. No approach. Just watching. I wiped the window with my sleeve. No one was there. But on the outside of the glass, where my sleeve hadn't touched, was a handprint. Small. What? Like someone had pressed their palm to the window just seconds before. I stared at it for a long time. 5 fingers. Slender. Too small to be a man's. It wasn't smeared, wasn't sliding. It was placed there carefully, like someone had wanted me to see it. Like a signature. I got out of the car. The cold hit me immediately, real cold. Not just weather. That kind of cold that seems to come from below you. From beneath the ground. There was a narrow alley just beside the bakery, choked with garbage cans and old crates. I didn't want to walk into it, but I did. Something, curiosity, fear, guilt dragged me forward. The further I went, the more the city seemed to vanish behind me. The wind stopped. Even the sound of distant traffic disappeared. And then I saw something at the end of the alley. A small, torn piece of fabric. Hanging from the rusted corner of a dumpster. The same fabric as the scarf. I didn't want to touch it. But I stepped closer anyway, my shoes crunching on broken glass. And then I heard it. A voice. Behind me. Soft. Familiar. Drive. I turned around fast. But the alley was empty. Only the sound of dripping water from an old pipe above. Yet somewhere between the shadows and the silence, I could swear I heard the faintest click of a door closing right behind my cab. The sound was unmistakable. A car door closing. Not slammed. Not carelessly shut. It was soft, measured, almost polite. Like someone who didn't want to draw attention to themselves. Like someone getting in and expecting me to keep driving. I froze at the end of that alleyway, heart pounding so hard I could hear the blood pushing through my ears. The dripping pipe beside me seemed to slow, each droplet stretching the silence even further, echoing off the metal like tiny time bombs. Click, click. I turned, slowly, careful not to make any noise. My cab sat where I left it, engine off, headlights dark. The windows were still fogged. Nothing looked out of place except for the faint glow from the rear cabin light, the kind that turns on when a door opens. It was on. And I hadn't left it that way. I took one step forward. Then another. Every sound felt amplified, the crunch of gravel under my boots, the creak of my leather jacket as I moved, the quiet, irregular rasp of my own breathing. The alley was behind me now, swallowed in shadow. I kept my eyes fixed on the cab, expecting no, fearing that I'd see someone move inside. A shape. A silhouette. Even the glint of eyes. But the windows remained blank. Just fog and the faint shimmer of the dome light above the rear seat. I reached the door. Put my hand on the handle. Hesitated. You ever touch something cold, not just surface cold, but deep cold? The kind that doesn't just chill your skin but seems to pull at your blood, your marrow, your thoughts? That's how the handle felt. Like I was about to open something I wasn't meant to look inside. Still, I pulled it. The door swung open with a soft hiss. The back seat was empty. At first glance. But the second I leaned in, I saw it. The scarf was gone. It had been sitting right there on the seat, next to the newspaper clipping. I'd left it before walking into the alley, hadn't touched it since. And now it was missing. The clipping, though, it remained. Except it wasn't exactly where I'd left it. It had been unfolded again. And there was something written on it now. I reached in, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. In faded, almost watery ink, someone had scribbled across the margin. He didn't stop the first time. Now he will. I stared at those words for a long time, trying to make sense of them. What did it mean the first time? Who didn't stop? What was being repeated? My mind raced, chasing itself in circles, but there was something in that moment that changed the air around me. It was like being watched. No, more than that. It was like the very act of reading those words had summoned something. I straightened up, looked around. The street was still empty. Not a single car. Not a single person. Not even the usual sounds, no buses rumbling in the distance. No late-night music from open apartment windows. And then a voice. Clear. Close. It came from the back seat. From the exact spot she'd been sitting. You were supposed to keep going. I jerked back so hard I almost fell, slamming the door shut in a panic. My breath came fast and shallow now, fogging the air in front of me. My palms were sweating despite the cold. I stumbled back toward the alley entrance and looked again at the cab. Still no one there. But on the inside of the rear window, a new handprint had appeared. Larger than the first. But not alone. 5 more surrounded it. Smaller. Like a child's. All pressed flat against the glass as if trying to get out, or worse, trying to get in. And that's when I noticed something else. The meter on the dashboard had started running again. Ticking up, cent by cent, mile by phantom mile. But I hadn't turned the ignition. I reached for my keys in my pocket, they were still there. Which meant someone or something had started the ride from the inside. I stood there, heart hammering, breath sharp and ragged, every instinct screaming to run, to leave the cab behind and get the hell out of that neighborhood. But I didn't. Because I remembered what the voice had said. You were supposed to keep going. What if I had done something wrong by stopping? What if I wasn't just a bystander in this anymore? What if I had been chosen? The meter kept ticking. And the passenger might still be waiting. The city wasn't the same anymore. Not in that moment. It had become something else, a hushed, gray place where time moved slower and the spaces between street lamps seemed longer than they should be. The cold was worse now, no longer the kind that simply bites at your skin, but something that seeps into your thoughts, makes everything feel a little thinner. I stared at my cab, the rear lights still glowing faintly through the misted windows. The handprints on the glass had begun to fade, not as if wiped away, but as if they'd been absorbed by the window itself. Like a memory being erased or rewritten. And that meter still ticking. Every red sent another beat in the pulse of something I couldn't explain. I should have walked away. I should have turned and kept walking until the city returned to normal. But I couldn't. Not because I was brave. Not because I wanted answers. Because I felt like I owed her something. Whoever she was, Leah, or whatever remained of her, she hadn't just vanished into that cab for nothing. She had picked me. Sat behind me. Left her scarf with me. And now she was still in there somehow waiting. So I got in. I opened the driver's door, slowly, cautiously. The second I crossed the threshold and sat down behind the wheel, the smell hit me. Lilac and wet soil. Like a funeral parlor after rain. The cab was colder than it had any right to be. The windshield fog had vanished, replaced by a thin layer of frost, despite it being barely above freezing outside. I looked in the rearview mirror. And there she was. Not clearly. Not like you'd see a person. But like a reflection caught in the corner of your eye, just the edge of a shadow, the faintest outline of someone sitting upright, unmoving. The seat wasn't indented. No breath fogged the glass. But still she was there. I didn't turn around. I don't know why, but something inside me knew not to look directly. Like it was a rule, one that didn't need to be written down. If you look, you see too much. You open something that can't be closed. So I faced forward. Hands on the wheel. Eyes on the road. Where to? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Silence. But the meter reset. It dropped back to 0. And the dome light faded out. I put the key into the ignition. My fingers shook, but I didn't drop it. The engine turned once, twice. Then started. Headlights came on. Radio flickered to life. But instead of static or music or talk, there was only the sound of breathing. Soft. Measured. Like someone sitting just behind me, calm and waiting. It was slow, but every now and then it would catch. Like whoever it belonged to had been crying not long ago. I pulled away from the curb. No address. No destination. I just drove. The rain started again, soft at first, then harder. But it didn't make a sound against the roof. It fell in silence, like the city didn't want to interrupt. I took random turns, unsure of where I was going, letting the streets guide me. Left on 44th. Right onto Jackson. Across the bridge into Greenpoint. Not a soul on the road. After a while, the city began to change. Not literally, but in feeling. Fewer lights. Older buildings. Windows shuttered or dark. Streets that seemed too narrow for cars built after 1980. Street signs rusted out or missing. I passed a bar I'd never seen before, windows painted black, a neon sign that said, "Open," even though it clearly wasn't. I felt like I was being led somewhere. Like I wasn't the driver anymore. And then I saw it. A small, two-story brownstone tucked between a pair of boarded-up storefronts. There were no lights on inside. No curtains. No address number. But the second I passed it, the meter stopped ticking. The passenger door unlocked. The sound it made, that soft, sharp click, it made my chest tighten. And for a moment I thought I could feel the seat behind me shift. But when I turned to look slowly, careful, no one was there. The back seat was empty. No indentation. No trace. But something had changed. The scarf was back, folded neatly on the seat. And beneath it, something else. A photograph. Color faded to sepia. Curled edges. It was a cab, an old checker, yellowed with age. Parked in front of this exact brownstone. And leaning against it was a man. My father. Or someone who looked almost exactly like him. Same eyes. Same jawline. Wearing the same leather driving gloves I keep in my glove box. Only thing is, my dad never drove a cab. He was a butcher. Died before I was born. I sat there in silence for a long time, holding that photo, scarf beside me, the breathing on the radio now replaced by nothing. Just silence. The kind that isn't quiet but empty. I looked at the house again. Still dark. Still watching. And then I noticed something in the window. Just the briefest flicker. A pale shape moving behind the curtain. Too fast to catch clearly, too slow to be the wind. I started the cab again. Didn't wait. Didn't question it. I drove until the sun rose, until people returned to the sidewalks, and the city remembered it was alive. But I didn't pick up another fare. Not that day. Not the day after. Eventually I left the job. Sold the cab. Got a new phone. New number. But sometimes at night I still hear it. The meter. Clicking up from 0. And someone breathing softly behind me. That's my story. Believe it. Don't. It doesn't matter. All I know is that I picked up a passenger on my last call. And she never really got out. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this story.